Discover a destiny reshaped by love and lineage. The grand hall gleamed under the glow of 100 flickering candles, their light warming the vaulted ceilings draped with rich tapestries. Heavy velvet curtains framed towering windows, outside which only shadows stirred beneath a moon drowning the night in silver. The air hung thick with the scents of roasted meats, fresh herbs, and the delicate sweetness of spiced pastries. Music floated like woven silk, part whispered notes from a distant lute, part vibrant melody echoing through the marble halls. Alara stood near the massive banquet table, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the ornate silver tray. The cake atop it was a masterpiece of confection, delicate layers, gilt with sugared roses, a promise of comfort and celebration crafted with the fire of her dreams. Her auburn hair peeked from under a simple linen cap, dusted faintly with flour like a halo, her green eyes alight with hope and anxious anticipation. Her heart pounded a rhythm mingling with the rising clamor of the courtiers assembling for the feast. Alara's gaze sought the Alpha King across the hall, a flickering beacon beneath the heavy canopy of regal pageantry. But the king's eyes passed over her like she were mere mist, his voice caught instead by the silken words of Lady Cressida, whose presence was sharp and commanding as polished steel. A whisper curled like smoke near Alara's ear, the venom dripped with careful art. "Is that the baker's girl? Dare she present her wares at court, after all?" Alara's throat tightened. A flush crept across her cheeks beneath the dusty flour. But she held the tray steady as Lady Cressida's shadow severed the light, moving with calculated grace. The noblewoman's smile was a blade smile that cut short the dance of possibility and layered the air with chilling disdain. Without words, her gloved hand gestured towards the caca's subtle motion that summoned a mischievous page, eyes alight with malice. Minutes later, a soft, sickening thud silenced the gathering. The cake, the emblem of Alara's dreams, was slammed to the floor, crushed and smeared under the polished boots of the attendants. Gasps echoed like gunshots. The courtiers' laughter rippled, cold and cruel, weaving through the vaulted halls. Alara's chest tightened. The warmth of the candles withdrew as if snuffed by invisible hands. "A baker's work is best kept from the eyes of kings." Lady Cressida's voice rang smooth, sharp, damning. Alara's hands clenched into fists, flour dust rising like fallen snow. Her green eyes burned not with tears, but with the quiet strength born from knowing this was but the first flame she would kindle in defiance. The chandeliers gleamed with cruel brilliance as the laughter swelled. In that moment, amidst betrayal and humiliation, Alara understood the true contest was no longer the oven's heat, but the cold fires of a court unwilling to see her worth. Her breath caught in the sudden silence before the storm of scorn. She turned, porcelain resolve carved on her youthful face, and stepped away from the shattered suite, solitary figure moving quietly against the tide of shadows, the faint flicker of an unseen candle burning deep within. The tired glow of dusk settled over the village, softening the sharp edges of the bustling market and the rough outlines of timber-framed cottages. In the fading light, the once rhapsodic golden hues of the banquet hall felt like a distant dream swallowed by shadows. Alara's footsteps echoed hollow on the lonely path leading back to her bakery, each step weighed down by a silence that screamed louder than the ruined cake and the cruel laughter that still hung in her ears. Her auburn hair, no longer tied neatly, tumbled in a careless cascade, catching the last droplets of daylight that lingered like fragile embers. The faint dusting of flour on her cheeks seemed less an emblem of creation and more a stubborn shroud masking the swelling tide of shame within her. Inside the bakery's warm embrace, the scent of yeast and warm bread was a muted comfort against the storm of hurt and humiliation threatening to consume her. She sank to a worn wooden stool, breath shallow and rapid, hands trembling as they brushed over the scarred tabletop. The soft glow from a single candle flickered, casting long, quivering shadows that danced against the walls filled with memories of fleeting triumphs and enduring dreams. Her mind raced questions swirling in a vortex of doubt. Was she destined to be forever invisible, a quiet presence overshadowed by nobility's glare? Would a humble baker ever be more than a fleeting footnote in the grand tapestry of this opulent duchy? The distant murmur of the bustling streets felt like an accusation, the laughter and voices blurring into a cruel chorus reminding her of the gulf dividing her from the gilded world beyond her kitchen walls. Yet, beneath the layers of despair, a stubborn ember flickered, a defiant spark kindled by remembered dreams and quiet determination. Alara's gaze fell to a lump of dough resting in a bowl, malleable and waiting. Her fingers traced the curves of the heavy silver pendant resting hidden beneath her simple dress, a secret she had not yet dared to understand, a symbol waiting to be claimed. Her breath steadied, eyes flashing with unspoken resolve. Even as shadows pressed close, the candle's flame endured a fragile beacon in the encroaching dark. A soft knock on the door startled her, a tentative voice whispering from beyond. "Alara, are you well?" She hesitated, then straightened, the faintest smile breaking through the veil of anguish. "I will be." The evening deepened, wrapping the world in velvet silence, but within the modest bakery, the dance of light and shadow whispered of beginnings of strength found anew in the quiet spaces between pain. And as the candle flickered steadily, a new chapter stirred on where the humble heart might yet unlock a destiny far greater than the cruel laughter of courts and the peril of forgotten hope. The sun began to set behind the distant hills, casting a fading orange glow over the quiet village as Alara stepped through the worn wooden door of her bakery. The warm scent of rising bread and toasted crust mingled with the faint chill of an autumn evening creeping through the cracks around the windows. The soft flicker of candles illuminated the modest space, painting gentle shadows over floor-dusted counters and the array of copper pans hanging like trophies from the ceiling. Alara moved slowly to the back of the shop, past the oven's weary heat, toward the narrow door leading to the small storeroom and yard behind the bakery. The weight of the day pressed heavy in her chest, the sting of humiliation still fresh yet now tempered with something unfamiliar, a flicker of restless curiosity amid the ache. Outside, the cool air wrapped around her like a shroud, carrying the scent of damp earth and withered herbs from the garden long neglected. Moonlight seeped through the gnarled branches of old trees, casting fragmented patterns on the cobblestones beneath her feet. From beneath a loose slab of stone, Alara spotted something metallic, glinting faintly in the moon's pale glow. Kneeling, her fingers unearthed an ancient silver pendant, its surface etched with a crest unfamiliar yet strangely resonant. She held it reverently, the cold metal pressing against her palm like a heart beat unarded, hidden, waiting. The pendant's intricate design mirrored the ornate carvings she had glimpsed in the castle's chapel, the emblem a symbol of nobility she had only dared to dream of. Her breath hitched as fragments of whispered tales and half-remembered stories swirled in her Minda lineage concealed, a future unwritten. A candle flame flickered suddenly in the distance, the wavering light a quiet challenge to the gathering shadows. It was fragile but alive, a beacon for the courage she never knew had kindled within her. Alara's gaze lifted to the star-studded sky, the constellations familiar yet charged with new meaning. The room behind her hummed with the soft warmth of the oven's last embers, promising sustenance and comfort, the hearth of her identity. The weight of the court's scorn still lingered, but beneath it now thrummed the pulse of something potent, a hidden strength intertwined with a past yet to be claimed. With a steadying breath, Alara clasped the pendant around her neck, the delicate chain cool against her skin, a tangible link binding her to a destiny reaching beyond the hearth and market square. The night air held its breath as she turned from the shadows toward the uncertain path ahead, where hope flickered fiercely despite the darkness. And as the first notes of a distant folk tune floated on the wind, mingling with the soft, persistent crackle of candle flames, Alara took her first step forward, unseen no longer, her humble heart opening to the greatest of destinies. The morning dawned muted and gray, rain streaking the arched windows of Alara's bakery in relentless rivulets, echoing the turmoil within the young baker's heart. Gray clouds cloaked the sky, casting a somber shadow across the bustling market town as merchants hurried beneath patchy awnings, and cobblestones glistened with fresh moisture. Yet inside the warm, fragrant space filled with the scent of yeast and cracked cinnamon sticks, a flickering flame of determination began to burn. Alara wiped her hands on her apron, the fabric rough against floor-dusted skin, a tangible reminder of her humble origins. Her eyes, sharp and fiery as ever despite the morning's chill, scanned the handwritten orders pinned beside the oven. Each scribbled request was a small victory, a quiet claim to a place in the community she had never dared imagine beyond the shadows of noble courts. Outside, the storm had begun to quiet, the damp earth releasing a deep, loamy fragrance that mingled with her own rising resolve. It was a scent of survival. Today, Alara would bake not just to fill bellies, but to rebuild the fragile hope snatched away in the flickering shadows of the banquet hall. She measured, mixed, and kneaded dough, fingers floured and steady despite the tremors of past humiliation. The oven's warm glow kissed her cheeks as the room filled with the comforting crackle of rising bread. But doubt clung stubbornly beneath her skin, whispers seeded by Lady Cressida's cruel smile and the sneers of nobles. Could a commoner truly haul herself from obscurity to command attention? Was resilience enough to kindle the flickering candle of possibility against the damp gusts of court politics? Her thoughts shattered like the brittle crusts of a bread burned past golden perfection, stirring sharp frustration with every falter. Footsteps approached a familiar gate. Duke Aram's shadow darkened the doorway, regal and imposing. His gaze swept the room, settling briefly on a freshly baked batch of pastries, suspicion and thinly veiled contempt gleaming in his eyes. "Quite an improvement," he murmured, voice a silky threat. "But will the Duke deign to reward such perseverance?" Alara met his gaze, unfaltering. "I bake to nourish, not for favors." A flicker of something unreadable passed over Aram's face before he turned away, his cloak billowing like a storm cloud retreating into the corridors of power. The faint strains of a lively folk tune drifted through an open window, soft notes carried on a playful breeze that intertwined with the scent of fresh-cut wood and sweet dough. Alara's hands paused a breath steadied her hurried pulse. A tray of golden rolls slid from the oven, their crusts crackling as steam curled upward, a small triumph rising from the ashes of doubt. Outside, the clouds parted briefly, light spilling onto the wet cobblestones fractured but endless. She placed the tray on the counter, the warmth radiating like a quiet promise. Yet within her, the embers of uncertainty smoldered a question unspoken, lingering between hope and the shadows stretching from Lady Cressida's realm. Was it enough to fight alone? As the door creaked open once more, the distant echo of court footsteps corrupted the moment's fragile peace. And with it, the story poised on the cusp of a gust ready to either uplift or consume. The castle corridors echoed with delicate footsteps and whispered intrigues as Alara navigated the gilded labyrinth of court politics. The fragrant warmth of freshly baked pastries lingered in the air, mingling with the sharp, cold tension she felt beneath the polished marble. Every nod from a noble's brow carried the weight of judgment, every smile masked a hidden stratagem. Her hands, steady but worn from toil, cradled a tray of pastries, each one a triumph over the shadows cast by Lady Cressida's relentless disdain. The Duke's occasional glances, subtle yet undeniable, flickered with approval when he sampled her creations, a fragile beacon gleaming through the fog of manipulation. Yet whispers wove through the corridors like serpents in the underbrush. Cressida's silken words dripped poison, quiet threats veiled as courteous advice, urging caution and loyalty to the established order. One evening, as twilight bled its hues over towering stained-glass windows, Alara was betrayed by a friend she had trusted, a fellow baker who succumbed to the Duke's machinations, forsaking loyalty for power. The sting of betrayal was sharper than any blade, severing the fragile bonds she had begun to forge. Her nights became battlegrounds of doubt and defiance, where sleep eluded her beneath the weight of whispered accusations and the flickering candle flame that danced with uncertainty. In the kitchen's solitude, she fought to reclaim her spirit, kneading dough and folding stories into her pastries, each a secret message, each bite a subtle rebellion. The silver pendant concealed beneath her layers of fabric pulsed softly, a heartbeat of hidden heritage and unspoken destiny. Amidst the storm, Alara met the Duke's gaze, a silent exchange charged with unspoken challenges and tentative respect. Their alliance was forged in quiet urgency, an uneasy dance of trust and power on a gilded stage shadowed by Cressida's scheming presence. The day of the court's grand culinary competition dawned with ominous promise. Alara's heart thundered as she unveiled her finest creation, the richness of her pastries a stark contrast to the cold eyes scrutinizing her every move. But amid the swirling tension, the pendant, a gleaming beacon of her lineage, was uncovered, setting off a chain of whispers and wide-eyed stares that rippled through the court like wildfire. Alara's breath caught, the moment hanging suspended, a fragile pivot upon which her world would turn. The flickering candle flame of hope danced steadfast against the gathering storm, yet shadows deepened with the arrival of Lady Cressida's victorious smile, a promise of battles yet to come. Outside, the distant tolling of the cathedral bells echoed, marking time in a kingdom poised between revelation and upheaval. The vaulted ceiling above the grand hall stretched endlessly, the flickering chandelier casting fractured light across the assembled courtiers whose eyes glinted like sharp blades set on a prey. Alara's hands trembled slightly as she moved through the sea of unfamiliar faces, the silver pendant lying hidden beneath her apron becoming an unbearable secret against her chest. Her breath quickened, the scent of spiced bread and melted candles wrapping around her, intoxicating yet heavy with the ghosts of past betrayals. Tonight was meant to be a triumph, her chance to rise beyond the soot-streaked windows of her humble bakery, to touch the golden fabric of nobility with the artistry of her craft. But fate, entwined with Lady Cressida's cunning, wove a more merciless tapestry. The culinary competition buzzed with expectation and thinly veiled rivalry. Alara's creation was a delicate dance of flavors, a metaphor of warmth and hope. Honey-kissed pastries brimming with spiced fruit, dough tender as the whispered promise of dawn. She presented them with trembling pride as impossible glances from the skeptical nobility weighed upon her like a storm. Then came the moment when fate turned its cruel gaze. A fellow competitor, once a trusted ally guided by whispers louder than loyalty, deliberately mishandled Alara's finished plates, smudging, scattering crumbs with reckless abandon. Murmurs swelled, sharpening into an avalanche of suspicion and scorn. Eyes darted, mouths curled with amusement or disdain, Lady Cressida's smile slicing across the hall in lethal triumph. Amara's heart fractured, the silver pendant slipping from her gown with a soft clink onto the floor, exposed in shimmering vulnerability beneath the watchful gaze of the Duke. Gasps rippled through the audience, a royal crest unmistakable and screaming of secret legacies long buried. A silence fell, broken only by the pounding in Alara's ears, the world slowing as pieces of her identity spilled bare for all to see. Whispers swelled, some shocked, others greedy, as ancient bloodlines were whispered anew, transforming a baker from a shadow to a sovereign heir overnight. Yet, with revelation came new perils. Lady Cressida's eyes narrowed, her lips curving into a smile born of malice and calculation. The court's judgment twisted from curiosity to condemnation. Favor shifted with the winds of rumor. Alara's cheeks burned not from shame but from the blazing fire of awakening. The pendant, once a secret kept for fearful protection, now roared as her banner, a double-edged sword threatening both sanctuary and exile. Her gaze locked with the Duke's, resolve igniting beneath the flickering candlelight. "I am more than the shadows cast by your doubt," she declared, voice unwavering amid the storm of whispered slights. The room held its breath, a kingdom poised between ancient betrayal and a new dawn, its fate entwined with the fate of the humble girl who dared to rise. As the chandelier's crystals caught the last light of day, casting prisms against the vaulted stone, Alara stood at the precipice of destiny, her future fractured yet fiercely glowing with unyielding promise. The corridors of the grand castle felt oppressively silent, the echo of Alara's footsteps a hollow reminder of all she had lost. Shadows stretched long beneath the flickering candle sconces, their wavering light casting distorted shapes on tapestries that once told stories of triumph and honor, now seeming like distant echoes of those she could no longer claim. Alara's reflection caught in the warped glass of an ornate mirror, a fragment of the woman she was and the stranger she'd become. The silver pendant, once a secret resting softly against her skin, felt heavier now, a cold weight pressing into her collarbone as if it carried the burden of unspoken expectations and the scar of betrayal. Her emerald eyes, sharp but dulled with exhaustion, scanned the quiet room where the Duke's whispered promises had turned to biting deceptions. Walls that had once held warmth now suffocated, filled with the calculating glances of courtiers masking their ambitions behind smiles too sharp to trust. Outside, the sky wept a relentless rain, the storm's rhythmic patter against stained glass a mournful hymn mirroring the tempest within. Each drop traced icy paths along the windows, blurring the grandeur into a watery veil, a world distorted, slipping through her fingers like rising steam from the ovens she so lovingly tended. The scent of fresh bread from distant kitchens mingled strangely with the heavy scent of damp stone and wilted roses, the latter, a cruel motif from a time when hope still flickered low but steady. Her heart hammered painfully, the walls closing in as the solitude of powerless knowledge sank deep. Letters once comforting had become torches of flame, exposing truths but also igniting enemies. Friends had turned away. Whispers of her heritage were twisted into weapons wielded by Lady Cressida's scheming hand. The severance came not in grand confrontation but in subtle betrayals by those she once called friends, their loyalty sold for court favor. Alara's hands clenched, her fingers breaking the fragile crust of a bread loaf resting untouched on a carved oak table. "What am I to do?" she whispered to the empty room, voice brittle as the crumbs slipping between her fingers. The flickering candle flame beside her wavered, casting trembling shadows, as if consumed by the mounting darkness. Time slowed. Each breath was laborious, the weight of her shattered dreams pressing down with palpable force. The castle, vast and cold, held her captive in a labyrinth of fractured identities and political games. Outside, the storm's fury intensified, thunder rumbling like the distant roar of a king's decree, while within, Alara sank beneath the waves of loss, her sanctuary of flower and warmth torn away, leaving only the void. The mirror's shards reflected her fractured soul, the candle's flame a fragile pulse on the verge of extinguishing. And as the night deepened, so did the silence, a silence that swallowed hope and left only the echo of a young woman's courage faltering at the abyss. The solitude of the chamber was profound, a vast emptiness that pressed in on Alara like the heavy stone walls surrounding her. Outside, night had deepened into an oppressive veil, the moon shrouded beneath swirling clouds that released a cold, relentless wind. The hearth's fire had long since spilled to embers, and the faint scent of smoked wood clung to the air, the only reminder of the warmth that had once drawn the room alive. Alara sat curled in a corner, the simple lines of her peasant dress enveloping her small frame as though she sought to fold herself into invisibility. Her auburn hair, untied and uncombed, tumbled loosely around her pale face, framing eyes dull with exhaustion and glazed by encroaching despair. The dusting of flour on her cheeks, once a badge of her craft and passion, now merely ghosted her skin like faded memory. Her hands rested lifeless on her knees, trembling subtly. In her fingers lay the silver pendant, the ancient crest barely discernible beneath the tarnish. It was a relic, a mystery, and a cruel tormenta symbol both of hidden lineage and the cavernous uncertainty gnawing at her sense of self. From somewhere deep within the silence came the faint drip of water, a slow rhythm like a ticking clock marking time outside of time, and the sparse flutter of tattered curtains stirred by the draught, whispering secrets untold. Each breath she took was shallow, each heartbeat faint, a rhythm drowning beneath the swell of isolation. Her mind replayed scenes of betrayal, the subtle manipulations by Lady Cressida, the frozen smiles of erstwhile friends, the cold calculation in the Duke's eyes as he distanced himself under unseen pressures. Love was unraveling in her grasp, destined to slip away like grains of sand between trembling fingers. A shattered loaf of bread, left uneaten on a cracked platter by the kitchen door, mirrored the fractured pieces within Heir's sustenance, once rich, now rejected and forlorn. Alara's mouth parted, forming a word lost to breath. Why? No answer returned but the cold wind's mournful sigh and the creeping shadow stretching long across the stone floor. Tears, unbidden and silent, traced cold paths down her cheeks, catching the feeble candlelight flickering on the worn wooden table. The candle itself shuddered, fighting a losing battle against the gathering dark. The distant call of an owl echoed through the night air, a lone sentinel mourning the loss of light. Alara's gaze dropped to the pendant again, the silver crest blurred through her tears, the symbol of a destiny yet unknown but painfully near. In that fragile glimmer lingered a whisper of hope, too faint to rescue her now but enduring nonetheless. Empty walls absorbed the weight of despair, the chamber a tomb for the quieting flicker of a once fiery heart. And as the candle finally surrendered its flame, darkness claimed the room wholly, a perfect echo to the fragile shattering within Alara's soul. The chamber was shrouded in deep twilight as Alara sat curled on the edge of a narrow window seat, the muted light spilling in soft pools across her weary face. Outside, the gardens beyond the castle walls slumbered beneath the heavy cloak of night, the intricate lattice of branches casting delicate shadows, like fractured memories flickering in the corners of her mind. The warmth of a single candle flickered beside her, its slender flame wavering in the breath of a faint draught, fragile but unyielding. In her trembling hands, she held a small, worn bundle of parchment letters folded neatly, tied with a thread frayed by time. These words, written by her mother's hand, had been hidden away in an old chest among linens and relics of a past Alara had yet to fully grasp. The script traced the contours of hope, courage, and love that transcended rank and blood. The silence between pages hummed with the ghosts of whispered encouragements and unspoken truths, a tender echo that stirred the embers of resolve dormant deep within her. Tears welled and spilled gently down her cheeks, catching the candlelight as she read passages that spoke not just of hidden lineage but of an unbreakable spirit, a call to rise when the shadows pressed hardest. Outside, the night wind carried the distant toll of a bell, solemn and slow, marking the hour, resonating like a heartbeat in the stillness. With a deep, steadying breath, Alara pressed the letters close to her heart, the silver pendant lying cool beneath the folds of her dress seeming to pulse softly in unison. The symbol of her unknown heritage was no longer an enigma but a flame guiding her through the labyrinth of despair. Her gaze lifted to the window, where the moon's pale glow bathed the dew-dappled roses once wilted, now seemingly touched by the promise of renewal. A faint whisper escaped her lips, fragile yet filled with the weight of new strength. I will not be undone. The candle's flame steadied, casting a renewed glow that seemed to push back the darkened corners of the room, bathing the space in warmth. And in that tender moment of fragile, trembling pause between night and dawn, Alara felt the first true breath of hope, a seed planted deep in the soil of her heart, destined to bloom against all odds. The journey ahead would be treacherous, marked by shadows and whispered plots, but within her kindled spirit burned a light that neither power nor betrayal could extinguish. Rising slowly, she allowed the soft folds of her dress to brush the wooden floor, her footsteps quiet but certain as she prepared to embrace the path set before her. The chamber settled into stillness once more, but a silent promise lingered, a melody of inner courage and quiet defiance carried upon the breath of the encroaching dawn. The light in the kitchen softened as dawn crept through the high, narrow windows of the castle's secluded pastry chamber. Golden hues spilled gently across the polished pine countertops, turning the fine flour dust into tiny sparks that shimmered in the quiet air. Alara stood bathed in this fragile morning glow, fingers dusted with the familiar white powder, meticulously kneading soft dough with an intimacy born of years spent coaxing life from humble ingredients. Beyond these ancient stone walls, the court outside moved with its usual pomp and whispered intrigues. But here, in this modest sanctuary, time slowed, offering a reprieve from shadows that once threatened to drown her spirit. Her eyes, now steady mirrors of fiery determination tempered by hardship, traced the familiar knife marks on the wooden board, each a quiet testament to resilience. The silver pendant nestled beneath her linen dress pulsed faintly like a silent heartbeat, an unspoken clue to the identity she was only beginning to embrace. Her breath caught when the distant strains of a lively folk melody floated through an open window, the music weaving warmth into the air, a stark contrast to the chill of doubt that had gripped her moments before. It was as if the kingdom itself exhaled a soft sigh of welcome, urging her to press forward. Kneading ceased as she lifted a soft ball of dough, its texture smooth and promising. It was sustenance and comfort, the language she knew best, the art that had long whispered of hope beyond social bounds. Her whispered words were a prayer and a promise. I am more than the shadows that chase me. The room seemed to hold its breath with her, the candle flame near the hearth flickering but steady, a small, defiant beacon against the encroaching dusk of uncertainty. Alara moved with quiet grace, preparing pastries that might one day sit upon the Duke's table, each fold of pastry a pledge of her reclaimed worth. Yet as she carried a tray of golden croissants toward the servants' passage, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a figure concealed by the dim light at the corridor's edge. It was a servant, weathered and worn, bearing a carefully folded parchment. Their eyes met, and in that gaze, a fragment of trust passed, a secret bridge over the gulf of courtly suspicion. Alara unfurled the letter with trembling hands, the parchment itself soft and frail but heavy with the weight of potential revelation. The words within spoke not just of her lineage but of the hidden threads linking her destiny to the very heart of the duchy. A gentle warmth blossomed in her chest, fragile yet unmistakable. The journey toward recognition had begun, its path uncertain but alive with possibility. She folded the letter carefully, the soft candlelight playing over the embossed crest on the parchment, a symbol that might yet transform whispers into triumphs. Below the flickering candle flame, Alara's fingers traced the edges of the silver pendant nestled close to her skin. With a determined breath, she lifted her chin, eyes shimmering with the first true gleam of hope. And as the melody outside swelled into a cheerful crescendo, the kitchen doors swung open, beckoning her onward into the vibrant, dangerous world beyond, the place where her courage would be tested anew, and her place in the grand tale of the duchy would be forged. The grand hall of the duchy's castle was cloaked in solemnity as dusk settled beyond its towering stained-glass windows. Alara stood poised near the center, the flickering candlelight casting elongated shadows that danced like specters upon the ancient tapestries. The air hummed with the hush of anticipation. She was not merely a baker tonight. She was a beacon challenging the dark cloak woven by those who sought to suppress her. Lady Cressida approached, her steps measured and poised, the sharp glint of malice barely concealed behind a polished smile. The nobles gathered, their expectant gazes alternately flickering between the two women on invisible battlefield charged with whispered rumors and simmering intrigue. Alara's hands rested steady by her side, the silver pendant beneath her gown pulsing faintly, a talisman of lineage reclaimed and battles fought. She met Cressida's gaze unflinchingly, eyes ablaze with the kindled flame of righteous resolve. "Your schemes have shadowed this court for far too long," Alara's voice rang clear, a melody of defiance and clarity. "But the truth, like baked bread, nourishes and endures." The room quivered with silence, tension curling like smoke through the candlelit air. Cressida's smile faltered, her carefully constructed guise cracking beneath the weight of accusation and emerging courage. From the sidelines, a loyal ally stepped forward, presenting proof of Cressida's manipulations: the stolen letters, the secret gatherings, the whispers that had poisoned the Duke's court. The evidence laid bare a web of deceit that had long fettered Alara's rightful place. A chorus of murmurs swelled into resolute voices, the nobles turning toward the honest flame blossoming in Alara's stead, their respect hard-won and sincere. The warmth in their eyes was a radiant contrast to the deep shadows that had once sought to claim her. The flickering candle flame by Alara's side burned brighter, casting away the lingering darkness, a symbol of inner strength forged in the crucible of hardship. Lady Cressida, cornered and stripped of her artifice, receded into an abyss of silence while Alara's figure remained resolute, framed by the glowing tapestries and the dawning light of justice. Near the towering windows, the first stars appeared, like pinpricks of hope glittering against the velvet night, an eternal reminder that even in the deepest darkness, light finds a way. Alara inhaled deeply, the air rich with the scent of spiced bread and blooming jasmine from the gardens below, embracing the fragility and power of this moment. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, faltered through the hushed chamber, no longer unseen, no longer unheard. And as the flicker of hope grew to a steady flame, the room throbbed with a new rhythm, one of beginnings born from struggle and the unbreakable heart of a humble baker destined for greatness. In that charged stillness before the coming storm, Alara stood, her journey no longer a quiet whisper but a rising chorus echoing through the halls of power and beyond. The future trembled before her fingertips, a landscape vast and unknowable, yet illuminated by the steady glow of courage born anew. The grand hall was suffused with a golden hue, sunlight spilling through towering stained glass windows to cast a kaleidoscope of colors dancing across the polished marble floors. Alara stood with poised grace beneath an ancient chandelier whose crystals caught the light, scattering brilliant fragments like stars aligned in celebration. The air was electric, thick with tension yet ripe with the promise of transformation. Lady Cressida's facade cracked beneath the steady gaze of the assembled court, her whispers of deceit exposed like thorns stripped from a once proud rose. The courtiers' murmurs shifted into ripples of admiration, their eyes drawn to Alara's steadfastness as she stood at the center of this unfolding reckoning. The silver pendant, once hidden and mysterious, gleamed boldly around her neck, a radiant emblem of a lineage reclaimed and a destiny accepted. Its gleam mirrored the flickering candle flames that lined the hall, each a testament to the flickering hope now burning fiercely within Alara's soul. The Duke, regal and unwavering, stepped forward from the shadows, his expression echoing respect and acknowledgement. His hand reached out, steady and affirming, a silent vow dissolving the barriers forged by envy and politics. "Alara," his voice resonated deep and sure, "you have earned your place not by birth alone, but by the courage and passion that define you." A hush settled over the room as he placed a protective hand upon hers, the gesture both personal and public, a declaration that echoed through the courtiers' hearts and minds. Alara met his gaze, her eyes shining with a quiet strength born of trials overcome. "I stand not for myself alone," she said, her voice calm but resolute, "but for those whose voices are lost in shadow, whose dreams flicker like fragile lamps awaiting the dawn. The hall seemed to exhale, the rich tapestry of power and tradition bending gently to the grace of authenticity and truth. Through vaulted arches and gilded corridors, whispers of change stirred, weaving a new narrative born from the humility of a baker and the heart of a leader. In this moment, the fractured mirror, once a symbol of broken identity, stood restored and whole, reflective of a soul mended by courage and love. Alara's gaze drifted toward the grand windows, where the gardens below basked in the warm embrace of the afternoon sun. Robust rose bushes blossomed anew, their petals unfurling like the countless possibilities unfolding before her. She inhaled deeply, the heady perfume of blooming flowers mingling with the lingering aroma of freshly baked bread, comfort, sustenance, and promise intertwined. With the Duke's hand firmly entwined in hers, Alara stepped forward, every stride a claim to her rightful place and a pledge to the path forged by truth and relentless hope. The court held its breath as she poised at the precipice of destiny, a woman transformed, unshakable, luminous, and ready. Beyond the stained glass, the sky gleamed clear and infinite, the light breaking free of shadow, heralding a future shaped by courage, love, and the humble power of a heart awakened. And in that radiant crucible of change, Alara found not just victory, but a profound peace and embrace of the journey that had brought her here, illuminated by the flickering flame of steadfast resolve. The castle gardens spread before Alara like a living tapestry, awash in the late afternoon sun that poured through the high, turning leaves of ancient oaks into shimmering canopies of gold. She walked slowly along the winding paths, the soft crunch of gravel beneath her feet mingling with the distant call of birds settling into their nests. The air was thick with the gentle fragrance of blooming roses, their petals a tender emblem of resilience and renewal. Alara's eyes, once sharp with the restless fire of youth, now held a quiet luminosity, an elegant blend of wisdom, gratitude, and peaceful acceptance. The silver pendant, heavy on a fine chain around her neck, caught the fading sunlight, sending delicate flares of light that danced like whispered memories upon the softened stone. As she moved, her hands traced the edges of the hem of her gown, a simple dress that spoke of the path she had walked from humble baker to noblewoman, each thread woven with trials, revelations, and quiet courage. The dusting of flour still clung faintly to her cheeks, a tactile reminder of the kitchen's hearth fires where her spirit had first been forged. The gardens themselves seemed to breathe alongside her, a symphony of light and shadow tempered by gentle winds that stirred the silken blooms into a soft, rustly secret language of strength and healing. Stopping near a weathered stone bench, Alara leaned against its cool surface, eyes drifting to the vibrant colors painted across the sky as the day yielded to dusk. The kingdom's sounds, the murmur of distant voices, the soft footsteps of palace guards, the rustling leaves wove into the quiet music of her reverie. A gentle smile graced her lips, tempered by the tender ache of remembered losses and hard-won victories. Her heart stirred with gratitude for the journey, painful yet necessary, that had led her here. Soft whispers of folk tunes, faint as a memory beneath the current of the wind, mingled with the subtleties of flickering candlelight from nearby windows, echoing the interplay of darkness and light she had come to know intimately. Her gaze drifted toward the silhouette of the grand castle rising above the treetops, its stone walls bathed in rosy glow and shadow, a living testament to the complex history she was now a part of. Its strength mirrored in her own. Within her chest, the familiar flicker of the candle flame burned steady, not a wild blaze, but a calm flame nurtured by the gentle hands of experience and hope. Alara closed her eyes, breathing deeply the cool, fragrant air. In the silence, a steady heartbeat whose rhythm resonated with hers, a pulse of life, renewal, and quiet certainty. As she opened her eyes, a single tear traced a line down her cheek, catching the last light like a gem, an emblem of peace forged from the fires of struggle. The world felt vast and open, a canvas waiting for the next stories to be written, and Alara stood ready to fill it with the humble grace and fierce love that had illuminated her path. The garden embraced its daughter, the past and future folding into a seamless moment filled with promise, strength, and the gentle power of a heart that had finally found its place. The castle's great hall had softened under the gentle light of dusk, shadows lengthening and intertwining with the warm flicker of candle flame that licked the ancient stone walls. Alara's hands moved deftly and with graceful certainty, arranging her creations with a tender reverence that spoke of healing and hope. The feast she had prepared was a sumptuous layering of her world's rustic breads baked with loving care, delicate pastries imbued with the richness of her newfound place, plates adorned with fruits and herbs from the royal gardens themselves. Around the long oak tables, nobles and commoners alike gathered, the earlier tensions momentarily dissolved in the clasp of shared sustenance. The rich aromas spiced honey mingling with the earthy scent of fresh herbs and warm bread wove a tapestry of comfort and belonging that transcended rank or pretense. Alara's eyes, usually fiery with unrelenting determination, softened as she watched the court's collective breath ease into a rhythm of quiet companionship. The polished surfaces caught the candlelight, casting golden halos around faces warmed by laughter and gentle words still hesitant but true. In a quiet moment, the silver pendant nestled beneath her gown caught the light, its mysteries blending with the glow of acceptance and belonging. It was no longer just a hidden lineage or a secret born of far-off blood. It had become a symbol of unity, of a journey that bridged the hearth and the throne. From a corner, the Duke approached, his steps unhurried but resolute. He reached for her hand with a tenderness that dispelled shadows, his eyes reflecting a depth of admiration and unwavering support. "This feast," he murmured with heartfelt warmth, "is more than sustenance. It is a bridge, the joining of hearts once divided by fear and silence." Alara nodded, the flicker of candlelight dancing in her gaze. "It is my way of bringing the world I grew up in to the kingdom I now serve and of honoring the roots that nourish us all." A hush fell over the gathering as couples, friends, and allies bowed their heads to partake in the communion of food and newfound unity. The humble breaking of bread echoed the breaking of barriers, a shared ritual binding disparate lives with the simple, profound act of sharing. Outside, the garden blooming beyond the arched windows shimmered beneath a rising moon, petals gleaming like delicate tears kissed by starlight. The woeful wilted rose long ago shed, replaced now by blooms basking in promise and renewal. Alara's breath caught as she savored the moment and embrace of past trials and the courageous hope that had bloomed from them. Her gaze drifted skyward, to the vault of night where constellations mapped the endless dance of time and destiny, ancient stories inscribed in the heavens mirrored by the resilient story unfolding below. A single tear traced a shimmering path down her cheek, a silent hymn of release and reverence. And as voices mingled and the music of life swelled softly through the hall, Alara felt the flicker of a candle flame within, steady, enduring, a light carried across darkness to illuminate the path not just for herself, but for all hearts brave enough to dream anew. In the gentle hush, the world held its breath, alive with promise and the quiet power of a humble heart forever changed. In the softly glowing hush of the royal gallery, the grand statue stood silent sentinel over a history carved in stone and memory. Alara's footsteps whispered against the marble floor, a tender rhythm carrying her through the solemn stillness of a place where past and present converged. The air shimmered faintly, an intimate space heavy with the weight of lineage, courage, and redemption. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached out, holding aloft the silver pendant, a delicate relic inscribed with the enigmatic crest that had transformed her life. It caught the faint light of the ornate chandelier above, casting reflective glimmers that danced like candle flames across her face, illuminating eyes brimming with quiet strength and tearful peace. With reverent care, She placed the pendant upon the outstretched hand of a statue, a noble ancestor whose carved gaze seemed both distant and infinitely knowing. The metal resonated softly against the cold stone, a marriage of past and present, of hidden truths given voice. Around her, the gallery breathed with the echoes of ancient footsteps and whispered prayers, the tapestry of generations woven into the very walls. Every portrait, every sculpted feature seemed to pulse with shared history and unbroken bonds. Alara stepped back, the weight of countless stories settling around her like a mantle. The faintest smile touched her lips, an expression born not of triumph alone but of surrender to a destiny lovingly embraced. Beyond the gallery's grand arches, the castle gardens lay bathed in twilight's tender light. Somewhere in the distance, a candle flickered in a window, a fragile beacon of hope and inner strength that had guided her journey from shadows to this moment of serene belonging. The cool evening air carried the faint murmur of a folk tune, ebbing and flowing like waves against the rocky shores of a distant sea. It was a melody both ancient and new, a lullaby for the heart and soul, weaving warmth into the lingering dusk. Alara's gaze drifted upward, tracing the coiling patterns of vines climbing the gallery's stone columns, their leaves catching the last glimmers of day. Life persisted in the quietest corners, a testament to resilience and renewal. As she stood in contemplative silence, a single tear escaped, a radiant drop that caught the gallery's light and shimmered before slipping away, a silent hymn to love regained and a future reclaimed. The world around her seemed to hold its breath, the gallery's sacred stillness a canvas for the story of a humble heart. Its light endured beyond the corridors of power, beyond the upheavals of fate. And as the night deepened, Alara turned slowly, her silhouette framed by the gentle glow, stepping away from the statue and into the embrace of a life chosen and cherished. The lingering music played softly on, a vibrant yet tender threshold between what was and what would be. In this fragile, radiant pause, the story found its rest, not an ending but a beginning, whispered upon the winds of time and hope. The gallery was still, save for the flickering echo of a candle's flame, steady, eternal, and luminous, an enduring symbol of a life embraced with courage. What path would you choose if fate called you? Share below.